Welcome to Consults Here Inc. and Interlink IQ. To conduct a document review utilizing the Clothing and Personal Effects program under the SQF Module 11.3.3, first check if the document title matches the uploaded file name on the dashboard. In this instance, we do have the same titles as the Clothing and Personal Effects program. Next, both must have the same document code. For this example, we do have 11.3.3P0. Since this is a template, we indicate the PCQI as the account initials. However, we can customize the code based on the company's initials. For the page number, we use the page X of Y format. Ensure that it reflects the current page position and the total page number of the document. Then insert the company logo here, together with the company name, the company address, and enter the designated department. For the originated by section, it can be the food safety, quality assurance, or the quality control personnel of the company. The originator ensures the implementation of the quality management and document control system. Enter the name of the originator, affix the signature, input the position title, and the date originated. For the reviewed by section, it can be the personnel assigned in the Quality Management Department who reviews the drafted document or its revision for accuracy and implementation. Enter the name of the reviewer, affix the signature, input the position title, and the date reviewed. For the approved by section, it must be the person in the C-level management who has approval authority. Enter the name of the approver, affix the signature, input the position title, and the date approved. The revision date is the same as the date originated or drafted by the author. For the effective date, it is the date the document was signed and approved. The publication date is when the document is published for distribution and initiated personnel training. The implementation date is when the document is distributed and personnel training is completed. For the supersedes, put original for the initial issuance of the document. For any revisions, reflect the initial revision date before the current revision. Please be reminded that this section must be properly filled out to be compliant. Now we will focus on the components of the program. First is purpose. The purpose is the implementation of any certification standard or compliance with a regulatory requirement. For this program, it is for implementation with the SQF Module 11 Edition 9 for food manufacturing under Clause 11.3.3. First, to implement SQF 11.3.3.1, the site shall undertake a risk analysis to ensure that the clothing and hair policy protects materials, food, and food contact surfaces from unintentional microbiological or physical contamination. Second, to implement SQF 11.3.3.2, clothing worn by staff engaged in handling food shall be maintained, stored, laundered, and worn so it does not present a contamination risk to products. Third, to implement SQF 11.3.3.3, clothing, including shoes, shall be cleaned at the start of each shift and maintained in a serviceable condition. Fourth, to implement SQF 11.3.3.4, excessively soiled uniforms shall be changed or replaced when they present a product contamination risk. Fifth, to implement SQF 11.3.3.5, disposable gloves and aprons shall be changed after each break, upon re-entry into the processing area, and when damaged. Non-disposable aprons and gloves shall be cleaned and sanitized as required, and when not in use, stored on racks provided in the processing area or in designated sealed containers in personnel lockers. They should not be placed or stored on packaging, ingredients, product, or equipment. Sixth, to implement SQF 11.3.3.6, protective clothing shall be manufactured from material that will not pose a food safety threat and is easily cleaned. All protective clothing shall be cleaned after use or at a frequency to control contamination, and stored in a clean and serviceable condition to prevent microbiological or cross-contact allergen contamination. Seventh, to implement SQF 11.3.3.7, racks shall be provided for the temporary storage of protective clothing when staff leave the processing area and shall be provided nearby or adjacent to the personal access doorways and hand-washing facilities. And eighth, to implement SQF 11.3.3.8, jewelry and other loose objects shall not be worn or taken into a food handling or processing station or into any area where food is exposed. Wearing plain bands with no stones, prescribed medical alert bracelets, or jewelry accepted for religious or cultural reasons can be permitted, provided these items are properly covered and do not pose a food safety risk. All exceptions shall meet regulatory and customer requirements and shall be subject to a risk assessment and evidence of ongoing risk management. The second component of the program is scope. The scope of the program is based on the purpose and serves as a guide in defining and describing the layout of the procedure. It includes the clothing requirements for processing areas, best practice for clothing, gloves procedure, jewelry and personal effects, personnel such as visitors, employees, production personnel, and service contractors, and cleaning and storage. Third is policy. The policies are the rules set by the company as their implementation guide. Employees and visitors wear clean clothing, footwear, and hair covering while in the processing area. Shoes are cleaned at the commencement of each shift by utilizing the foot bath sanitizer solution at the entrance of the processing area. Employees and visitors with excessively soiled clothing do not handle products or packaging materials. Employees engaged in low-risk processes wear uniforms off-site, provided they are properly cleaned at the beginning of their work operation. Employees working in high-risk areas do not wear processing uniforms off-site. Employees are prohibited from using cosmetics and fragrances. Before entering the production area, employees change clothes to their designated clothing and do not wear their clothes used outside of the facility. When required, gloves and aprons were kept in an intact and sanitary condition when used. When not in use, gloves and aprons were stored in a designated area, for example, a rack or sealed containers within lockers, not on products, packaging, or equipment. Disposable gloves were removed before each break, changed upon re-entry into the processing area, and when damaged. Employees always comply with hand-washing practices, even when gloves are used. Any disposable clothing is changed between breaks upon entry into processing areas and when damaged. When clothing is to be reused, it is properly cleaned and stored on racks or hangers. It cannot be stored on boxes, products, or packaging materials. Hairnets and beard snoods are worn by employees working on the packing or processing line or working around exposed products. Excessively soiled uniforms were changed or replaced when they present a product contamination risk. Jewelry and loose objects were removed before entering the processing areas. The quality department conducts a risk analysis to identify clothing needs and the clothing choices risks, which you may refer to clothing risk analysis. The fourth component of the program is procedure. The procedure is the step-by-step process and the actual implementation of the policy. First, under procedure, is clothing requirements for processing areas. The company provides a suitable uniform for the production personnel to give the employees the right tools to work effectively while ensuring food safety throughout the production. The uniforms for production personnel are comfortable, properly fitted, functions correctly in cold, hot, and wet environments, made of polyester, regularly sanitized after use, and stored in clean storage lockers. The uniform consists of the following: clean, light-colored, packetless shirts with Velcro, trousers made of durable and breathable materials, and slip-resistant safety shoes. Next is protective clothing. The company provides the materials used for protective clothing, designed for food safety and cleanability. Blue nitrile gloves for food contact are provided. Gloves, hair restraints including facial hair, beard, and mustache, ear protection, and eye protection are provided to all personnel and used where applicable. For coats, no pockets above the waist, cuff sleeves, in snaps or zipper, or no buttons. For aprons, it needs to be disposable. Next is uniforms for drivers, maintenance, and warehouse, followed by sanitation rain suits or gear, and earplugs. For gloves, it needs to be disposable. For non-disposable, cut-resistant, and heat-resistant industrial gloves meet. For hair restraints, it needs to be disposable. For bump cups, color-coded for management, supervisors, quality, production, sanitation, maintenance, and visitors. Next is eye protection and ear protection, safety shoes or boots and shoe covers, and meets intended use per regulatory and safety requirements. Then we have cleaning procedures, codes for processing, and uniforms for drivers, maintenance, and warehouse. Cleaning outsourced to third-party cleaning services, such as sanitation suits or gear, and clean and sanitize during operations. Next is storage procedures. Clean laboratory coats are stored in a clean storage locker. Soiled laboratory coats are stored in bins marked for cleaning by third-party cleaning services. Lastly, accessibility. Laboratory coats are available in the main hall on racks adjacent to processing area doorways. Temporary storage is available when staff leaves the processing area adjacent to the doorways and hand-washing facilities. Second, under procedure is best practice for clothing. Production and warehouse personnel are prohibited from wearing the following: sleeveless, see-through, crop-top shirts, clothes with buttons, clothes with pockets above the waist, fuzzy clothes, shorts, skirts, flip-flops and sandals, jewelry and accessories such as fake nails, false eyelashes, and nail polish, cosmetics like cologne and perfume, contact lens, cream, lotions, hair gels and hair wax, and medicated ointments. Management, executive, accounting, and office, food safety and warehouse personnel and visitors are prohibited from entering the production area without proper clothing, such as hair nets and coverings, bumper caps or hard hats, laboratory gown, coats, disposable gloves, face masks, safety shoes or boots and shoe covers, and closed footwear. Aside from clothing and grooming styles dictated by religion or ethnicity, management personnel is expected to dress in business casual or business attire. For business casual, sleeved, short or long, button-down shirt, sleeved, short or long blouse, blazer, jacket, dress slacks, trousers, chinos, khakis, and others or tight-fitting denim, and dress shoes. For business attire, sleeved, short or long, button-down shirt, suit and tie, blazer, dress slacks, closed-toed shoes, heels. Present a clean and professional appearance. Be well-groomed and wear clean clothing, free of holes, tears, or other signs of wear. And wear clothes that are not too revealing. No skirts, no shorts, and no tank tops. Third under procedure is gloves procedure. Gloves and aprons were kept in intact and sanitary condition when used. Disposable gloves are removed before each break, changed upon re-entry into the processing area, and when damaged. Employees comply with hand washing practices even when gloves are used, which you may refer to hand washing policy. Gloves are food grade and powder free. Gloves should be selected based on the hazards involved. Nitrile gloves protect against most chemicals and infectious agents. Rubber gloves protect against mild corrosive material. Neoprene gloves protect against most solvents, oils, and mild corrosive materials. Avoid latex gloves as many people are allergic or develop allergies to this material. Gloves are inspected before use and ensure that the gloves are not torn or punctured. Visual inspection can detect cuts or tears. Test for pinholes by trapping air inside, rolling them out. Gloves that appear discolored or stiff may be subject to excessive use or degradation and should be disposed. Follow the manufacturer's instructions for washing and caring for reusable gloves. Personal gloves are authorized for use, but must adhere to the glove procedure stated per sections 4.3.1 to 4.3.5. Fourth, under procedure is jewelry and personal effects. Jewelry and other loose objects including watches, worn or carried, complied with local regulatory authority and proper employee hygiene practices. If such hand jewelry cannot be removed, it may be covered with a material that can be maintained intact in a clean and sanitary condition and effectively protect against decontamination by these objects to the food, food contact surfaces, or food packaging materials. Facilities can adjust their good employee hygiene practices based on customer requirements, the risk to their product, product exposure, and processing conditions. Fifth, under procedure is personnel, visitors, employees, production personnel, or service contractors. First is visitors. All visitors, including management and maintenance staff, always wear suitable clothing and footwear when entering any food processing or handling area. Visitors wear clean clothing, footwear, and hair covering while in the processing area. Visitors with excessively soiled clothing are not to handle products or packaging materials. Facilities were required to enable staff and visitors to change into and out of protective clothing as required, which you may refer to Change Rooms program. Second is employees. Uniforms, footwear, and hair coverings are provided to employees in food manufacturing sites and are primarily for protecting materials, work in progress, finished products, and food contact surfaces. Employees always wear clean clothing, footwear, and hair covering while in the processing area. Employees always comply with hand washing practices even when gloves are used, which you may refer to hand washing procedure and policy. Next is production personnel. Staff engaged in high-risk areas constantly change into clean clothing or temporary protective outerwear when entering high-risk areas. Hairnets and beard snoods are worn by employees working on the packing or processing line or working around the exposed product. Any disposable clothing needs to be changed between breaks, upon entry into processing areas, and when damaged. This includes aprons, smocks, boot covers, and gloves. Disposable gloves are removed before each break, changed upon re-entry into the processing area, and when damaged. Next is service contractors. Service contractors are provided with protective clothing as required. Ensure that all service contractors are aware of the supplier's personal hygiene requirements and are provided with any necessary protective clothing or that protective clothing meets the exact requirements as those of the supplier's staff. Sixth, under procedure is cleaning and storage. Used disposable protective clothing is immediately disposed of appropriately. Non-disposable protective clothing was cleaned, which you may refer to 11.2.5 Cleaning and Sanitation Program. Where protective clothing is provided and used, it is made of a food-safe material and is easily cleaned. There is a cleaning regime in place for protective clothing. Provisions was made for the laundering and storage of clothing worn by staff engaged in high-risk processes and for staff engaged in processing operations in which clothing can be heavily soiled. Suitably equipped areas were designated for the cleaning of protective clothing used by staff. A wash area has been provided with sufficient hot and cold running water, a suitable detergent and sanitizer for cleaning and when necessary, suitable racks for draining or drying equipment, utensils, and protective clothing. These areas are identified and constructed so they do not present a hazard to other food processing operations. Gloves and aprons were kept in intact and sanitary condition when used. When not in use, aprons are stored in a designated area and are sent for cleaning by a third-party service provider. Protective clothing racks provide temporary storage for gloves, aprons, and other items when staff leaves the processing area for meals or other short breaks. When clothing is to be reused, it is properly cleaned and stored on racks or hangers. It cannot be stored on boxes, products, or packaging materials. Non-disposable aprons and gloves were cleaned and sanitized as required, and when not in use, stored on racks provided in the processing area or designated sealed containers in personal lockers and not on packaging, ingredients, product, or equipment. The fifth component of the program is responsibility. The responsibility of the person is indicated. It covers what to perform to comply with the procedure or the policy. For all personnel, shall adhere to this policy. For the Food Safety Team Lead, the PCQI or the SQF practitioner, visually inspect areas for compliance with this policy, oversee compliance of procedure, ensure personnel is trained on this policy and procedures, and monitor and take corrective action to ensure compliance with this policy. For the supervisors or department heads and team leaders, ensure and verify this policy and procedure is adhered to, and take corrective action to ensure compliance with this policy. For the quality personnel, validate training and adherence to policy and procedure, and monitor and document nonconformance observation is also known as discrepancy using corrective action or preventive action or the CAPA report. And for the quality or compliance department, document control, records, and archive. Sixth is corrective action. The corrective action is the process of taking appropriate steps to eliminate causes of nonconformities or other undesirable situations. First, train all personnel on this policy and reference SSOPs. Second, non-compliance requires retraining, suspension from job duties, or termination of employment. And third, personnel that has allergy or skin disease should assign to non-food contact task. Seventh is review quality. The review section serves as guidelines for conducting the annual or periodic review. A risk analysis has been conducted to determine clothing needs and choices. Company policies on clothing, including uniforms, gloves, hairnets, snoods, and footwear, are in place and are appropriate for the type of operation. All staff implements company clothing policies. Clothing provided to staff is appropriate and properly maintained. Clothing worn by the staff is clean. Clothing worn by staff in high-risk areas is not worn off-site. There is a clean or temporary clothing available for staff in high-risk areas. Items such as hairnets, snoods, and disposable gloves are available at accessible locations. Clothing designations, for example, color coding for high-risk or low-risk areas, are fully implemented. Clothing requirements for contractors and visitors are followed. Staff clothing is clean at the start of each shift. Staff clothing is changed when excessively soiled. Disposable gloves and hairnets are correctly disposed of. Non-disposable gloves and aprons are appropriately cleaned between uses. Protective clothing is provided that is fit for purpose. Protective clothing is provided that is made of material that does not contaminate food and is easily cleaned. There is a cleaning process in place for protective clothing. Properly designed racks are provided for protective clothing. Protective clothing is stored in an area accessible to staff. The jewelry policy is appropriate to the task, product exposure, and processing conditions. The jewelry policy is effectively implemented for staff, contractors, and visitors. Eighth is reference documents. The reference documents are the set of documents used to implement and monitor a program, policy, or procedure. It includes the clothing risk analysis, the equipment, utensils, and protective clothing program, the gloves policy, hair restraints policy, cleaning and sanitation program, change rooms program, and hand washing procedure and policy. Ninth is references. The reference section is composed of guides utilized to implement the program. Examples are the certification guide, regulations, and other widely accepted scientific journals, research, and the like. It must comply with the standard format citation, which can be based on either MLA, APA, or Chicago style, and update the access date. Lastly, history. The history section is where we can update the program if there are any changes or revisions made in the document. If there is a revision, enter the revision number, followed by the revision date, then the description of the change made, the name of the author or the originator, and the title or department of the author or the originator. Thank you for participating in this document review. Content presented are for training purposes only and are based on the interpretation of standards and best practices and must be customized for your intended use. To fully customize your programs, policies, procedures, forms for records, and lessons for training, you may contact Interlink IQ or Consultier Inc. at services@interlinkiq.com or simply call 202-982-3002. For free access, visit interlinkiq.com.